you. Thank you, Yu. Thank you. Yeah. And good morning, Professor Barney Dalgarno. Good morning, good evening, sorry. Good evening, Dr. Vishesh, Kumar, and Ms. Alicia Lian. Welcome to participate in this episode of Dean's Online Dialogue series of the Global Education Dean's Forum. I'm Xiaolei Zhang, Lisa from the Institute of Curriculum and Instruction, Faculty of Education, ECNU. It's my honor to moderate this online dialogue with a very exciting topic about the future education in an age of artificial intelligence. At first, let me introduce briefly about our forum and today's speaker and discussant. As you know that from 2018, ECNU and University of Kansas initiated the Global Education Dean's Forum with the purpose of establishing a platform for collaboration among the top educational institutions around the world. And this is a nice episode of the whole series and the second episode of this year, the 2024. Today we are invite the Professor Barney Dalgarno as a Dean speaker, and Dr. Kumar and Ms. Alicia as discussant. Professor Dalgarno is Executive Dean of the Faculty of Education at the University of Canberra. His research interests focus on the educational and social impacts of digital technologies, the learning affordance of virtual, mixed, and augmented realities, and the future of universities and schools in an age of digital disruptive innovation. He has had international influence through over 100 presentations and publications, awards, editorship of journals, and conference proceedings. Dr. Kumar, one of our discussants today, now is a postdoctoral researcher at Vanderbilt University's Peabody College. His research works on a variety of game contests in and out of schools based on data science and AI agents. Another discussant today, Alicia Lian, is a PhD candidate at Vanderbilt University's Peabody College, and her research focuses on embodied learning, mixed reality environments, and the application of the artificial intelligence in K-12 contexts. And the last, I'm Xiaolei Zhang, Lisa, from the Faculty of Education, ECNU. Nowadays, one of my research interests is to explore how technology can be used in teaching and learning, and to what extent teachers can improve students' learning with the support of AI agent. And perhaps this is one of the reasons I would like to moderate this online dialogue. Welcome. Today's online dialogue includes 3 sessions. First, 30 minutes, Professor Dalgarno will give us a presentation. After the presentation, both of our discussants, including me, will propose questions or have discussions with Professor Dalgarno about this topic. Then we will give some time for open questions from audience. And I eagerly encourage audience to write down their questions and comments in the message box. Okay, let's warmly welcome Professor Dalgarno. Give us the presentation. The title is The Future of Education in an Age of Artificial Intelligence, Utopia or Dystopia. Welcome.
Thank you, Lisa. And look, I'd like to, I might just share my slides. Okay, now is that okay?
Yes, it's okay. I can see.
Perfect. Thank you. So look, I'd like to just begin by thanking my colleagues at East China Normal University for the invitation for the University of Canberra to join the Global Education Dean's Forum, and also for the invitation to speak as part of this year's dialogue series. So as the title suggests, I will be talking today about future scenarios in the use of artificial intelligence, and particularly generative AI for education. And I'll be framing the question of whether the future will be a utopian future or perhaps a dystopian future. So I'm going to begin by talking about some of the current and future applications. And I guess I'm going to start by talking about the positive benefits of generative AI, both now and in the foreseeable future, before discussing some of the more negative or challenging kind of issues associated with the use of generative AI. So firstly, talking about some of the current usages that we're seeing of generative AI based on technologies that we have available to us today. Firstly, in the area of teachers' work, we're seeing teachers start to use generative AI for curriculum mapping, for scope and sequence documents, for planning lessons, sometimes for drafting assessment tasks, and sometimes for a range of different administrative tasks, such as writing proposals to take children on excursions out of the school, or for developing risk analysis for excursions, and a range of other kind of administrative activities. Now, all of these, I think, are unproblematic. There are some other areas where I think there are questions around the benefits, but where we can be sure that teachers are in fact already using generative AI. I am sure there are teachers who are starting to use generative AI to assess students' work and to generate feedback on students' work. And I'm certainly aware of teachers who are using generative AI to help them to generate comments for parents to go home as part of students' reports. And of course, these things could be seen as problematic because they're communications which people would expect to come from the teacher rather than from an AI. In the area of academic work within universities, academics are using generative AI for planning for their teaching, sometimes for drafting assessment tasks to give to students. I'm seeing people use generative AI as part of their literature exploration. I think a lot of academics now, when they're exploring literature in a new field, will be using Google Scholar for perhaps to find articles, but they'll also be using ChatGPT or other generative AI tools to provide summaries of the literature to kind of help them find key references that match with particular conceptual areas, particularly when they're doing some literature searching within a new field. Many academics are also using generative AI for a range of different admin tasks, developing their performance plans, doing risk assessments, travel plans, some of those things that academics have in the past complained about in terms of taking time away from what they see as their core academic work. Perhaps more problematic uses of generative AI by academics in university include use of AI for assessing students' work, for drafting grant applications, or for drafting research articles. And I know of particular academics who perhaps are publishing in a language that isn't their native language, for example, an English-speaking journal when English isn't their first language, and they're finding generative AI to be useful for helping to improve their English language for some of their publications. It's another kind of use. And I guess some might say that these are problematic applications because of the expectation that these kinds of writing are written by the academic rather than by the academic with the assistance of a tool. But we know that it's happening, and it's probably improving the quality of a lot of work because of that. And, you know, if we look at it from the perspective of our mission as academics, these improvements to quality may well be taking us further forward in terms of our generation of new knowledge. Within student study, Many students are using generative AI for seeking information on topics, for explaining concepts that they need additional explanations for beyond what's in the textbook or what they've heard in lectures, and getting feedback on drafts that they've written for assessment tasks. More problematic, of course, is actually drafting their assignments using generative AI or polishing or rewording their assignments. And I'll say a little bit about academic integrity shortly. So look, those are current scenarios which we know are in practice and increasingly becoming increasingly common within schools and universities. What I want to talk about now is some more future focused scenarios. So these are scenarios which I would expect we might see within 3 to 5 years. I must say these things are moving much faster than anybody expects. And so if I'm saying 3 to 5 years, it could well be 1 to 2 years. So what I'm going to do first, though, is to, in each case, talk about some current challenges that we see in schools and university learning, and then focus on the way in which, with the help of AI, we might see these challenges being addressed. So the first one is school classrooms. One of the biggest challenges in school classrooms is the student-teacher ratio, and alongside that, the expectation of a degree of personalised learning for students. Increasingly, teachers are expected to be aware of where each child is up to in all aspects of their learning and be able to provide personalisation in both the feedback for students, but also in the way that they frame learning experiences to suit those students' needs. It's hard for teachers to be prepared in advance for all of the emergent needs of students within a large class, and providing in-the-moment feedback while students are undertaking their learning is critically important, but again, hard to provide in large classes. In Australia, it's becoming more and more common for learning support assistants who are not trained as teachers, but perhaps have some training. Some of them are early education students to assist with this, to provide an additional assistant for teachers in the classroom. So how could AI help? Well, what the future scenario that I'm suggesting is one where every child has available to them on their desk an AI-driven assistant. And the scenario I'm suggesting is that the teacher is still responsible for the learning of the class as a whole, but at particular times during the learning, the teacher will ask an individual child's AI assistant to help them in particular ways with their learning. For example, they could help by providing individual children with one-on-one personalised instruction where they need particular instruction either to take them further forward if they're already mastering the material that the teacher is teaching the whole class, or alternatively for students who are not quite keeping up with the instruction for the whole class to be provided with personalised instruction to address their individual needs. The ability for these AI-driven assistants to watch children as they work on particular learning activities and to provide immediate feedback when appropriate, I think will be particularly powerful, because we know from many large meta-analytic studies how valuable personalised, immediate, in-the-moment feedback is for students. And then for students who have completed the set work, the ability for the AI assistant to respond to curiosity questions that go beyond the scope of the planned lesson without distracting the teacher who's trying to get everybody through their work will be an important addition. So the second scenario that I want to talk about is a workplace learning scenario. And here I'm talking about the situation where a pre-service teacher, that is a student who's training to be a teacher, goes out to a school as part of their workplace learning towards them becoming a teacher. Now, when our students go out to schools to do their professional experience, their work integrated learning, they're often initially overwhelmed due to the extraneous cognitive load in the situation. And if you look at this photo here, this could be the view that a student teacher sees when they're sitting in a classroom looking at this class while the students are paying attention to the lesson being delivered by the teacher. There's so much for the student teacher to see. There's everything on the walls, there's what the students are actually doing, what they're wearing, where they're attending to, and kind of looking at and trying to understand all of the children's behaviours. The student teacher could really benefit in these situations by guidance and answers to their own questions during observations. They would love to be able to freeze the experience and say to the teacher, hang on, when you're presenting this, are you aware that that child there is on their phone? Are you ignoring it, or are you not aware of it? You can see that child there has their hand up. Why aren't you answering the question? You know, all of these kinds of questions that a person observing a lesson might want to ask. Then once they start actually teaching their own lessons, the ability to get prompts and cues during their teaching practice, and also tips when engaging with their professional colleagues in the staff room. And finally, debriefs at the end of the day on both what they saw, what they heard, but also on their own teaching practice. So the scenario I'm imagining is one where we make use of augmented reality in combination with AI technologies to provide a scaffolding for that professional experience placement. So the notion of providing cues that are superimposed over the student teacher's field of view, telling them things about what they're seeing, and providing additional commentary to what they're seeing in the classroom, perhaps through earphones, so that it doesn't interfere with the lesson that they're observing. When they're actually doing their own teaching, the notion of being able to superimpose name tags on students as though every student has a name tag in the class could again remove that cognitive load of trying to remember the names of the students. But also through a similar technique, we could see prompts and cues from the AI superimposed over the student's field of view while they're walking around the classroom, delivering or supporting children in their learning. And the ability to record everything that occurs during practice and provide a debrief at the end of the day could be a key feature. So the third scenario that I want to talk about is just-in-time learning. I think you'd agree that many people these days, when they're cooking or fixing something in their home or doing some gardening, when they need to learn how to do something that they've never done before in their day-to-day life, the typical approach is to find a video on an online video platform such as YouTube and watch that video to watch somebody else doing that task. Often it can be hard to find an appropriate video, and sometimes when you try and replicate the practice you've seen in the video, it just doesn't work, and all you can really do is try and find another video and then try and replicate the practice again. And you may well destroy a number of your creme brulees before you actually find a video that tells you how to use your flambe torch to actually toast the top of them. So the scenario I'm imagining is one where when we're doing our day-to-day tasks, we might have a little video camera, perhaps hidden in a button on our shirt. We may have a earpiece in our ear connected up to our device. And the technology is watching what we're doing and from time to time popping up and saying, would you like a demonstration of this activity? And so being able to see a demonstration on your phone, but have the AI choose the video that actually best matches the task that you're trying to do. But then most importantly, when you're actually replicating that, that procedural demonstration, having the technology watch what you're doing and provide audio cues to say, hang on, I think you've got that blowtorch on too strong, pull it back a bit or you're going to burn your creme brulee. So that notion of having that kind of feedback during procedural tasks in your day-to-day life. So look, these are just a few scenarios where I think we can see within the next few years AI technologies really helping us both in helping teachers in classrooms, helping students learning at university, and helping us in our day-to-day lives. I think it perhaps sounds utopian, and if all of this played out the way I've described, I think we could say that is a somewhat utopian future scenario. But you might ask, is it really possible? Are these scenarios really possible? Professor Neil Selwyn, who is a very well-known technology and learning cynic, has suggested that the most recent period of AI resurgence has prompted intense hyperbole and exaggerated claims. And he's argued that the concern persists that there are not enough data points in the world to adequately capture the complexities and nuances of who a student is or how a school functions. And therefore, we can't expect an AI to really help us in the classroom. So to kind of check the validity of what Professor Selwyn has said, I've looked at what I see as the building blocks needed for these future scenarios. Now, obviously, the first one is the ability to generate coherent responses to text requests for information, explanations, or feedback. And we're all aware that ChatGPT can do this extremely well. Obviously, we don't always want to be typing our questions, so text-to-speech and speech-to-text software is a critical piece. And we know that there are very mature live transcription and live language translation technologies available, and they're now used in many of the apps that we use. Now, we also need the technology to be able to see what's going on in our lives, in our practice. So we need photo analysis and object recognition technology, and this is also quite well advanced. And we need the ability to generate images to show us how to do things. And again, photo generation from text is well advanced. And so it's not ridiculous to think that we could create a technology that brings together the generative text AI with the generative photo AI in the context of a learning scenario to generate explanatory pictures. Now, the use of augmented reality glasses is also well advanced, and there are many off-the-shelf products that are quite affordable. So we can assume that that's available to us. I think where there's a couple of challenges at the moment with technology is in live video analysis. So if we want to have a camera on our buttonhole or a camera on our glasses that's watching what we're seeing and providing us with live information about what we're seeing and live feedback on our practice, that can be challenging because the video analysis technologies available now often involve a delay in terms of analysing a pre-recorded video and struggle with doing sophisticated live video analysis. Similarly, if we want the technology to not just find us a video to show us how to do something, but actually generate a video to show us exactly what we need, again, video generation is difficult to do live and in the moment. It takes time to generate a video, and in my experience, it's a bit hit and miss as to whether it's actually generating a video that actually suits the purpose. So see those as areas that we're going to need over the next couple of years before we have all of these scenarios in place. I think the other one that's, I think, even more problematic is having a kind of proactive pedagogical layer that actually organises things. If we actually want AI tutors to not just respond to the questions of the learner, but actually take control of the situation, understand the learner's needs, the learner's goals, and the content area, and provide instructional experiences for the student that will take that learner on a journey towards the intended learning outcomes, then we really need to bring together the decades of research in intelligent tutoring systems or cognitive tutors and somehow combine that with generative AI. And I'm sure we'll be seeing some of that work coming out of labs like the lab at Carnegie Mellon, that Ken Codinger leads, because they're really the sort of the place where we see a lot of the really leading edge work in this space. But I see some big conceptual challenges because the kinds of AI that are in intelligent tutoring systems and cognitive tutors, it's quite a different design of AI to what we see in generative AI. And bringing those things together, I think, won't be conceptually simple. So I think we can argue then that these utopian scenarios, with some additional research to address some of those problems, are likely to be achievable, and certainly within 3 to 5 years. So I think we can perhaps conclude that perhaps a utopian scenario is possible, but we've ignored some of the important problems and issues. And so part 2 of my talk then is to look at some of the issues with generative AIs and kind of look at some of the things that could in fact make the future more dystopian than utopian. And the first of those that I want to look at is assessment integrity. And I've used this graphic here because I feel as though whenever we're talking up the potential of AI for learning, the elephant in the room is always academic integrity. The problem that almost any written assignment can be completed to a reasonable quality level by generative AI. And it's now almost impossible to reliably detect whether a document has been written by generative AI or a human. Sometimes we can do this by, if we know our students well, we can see mismatches in the writing style that they've shown before and the quality of the work that they're submitting. But it's so easy now to ask generative AI to produce a piece of work that is written in a way that follows a particular writing style so that students can kind of hide that difference. So if students are not motivated to learn, they can very easily fake learning and learn very little. And if this becomes widespread, that is definitely a utopian future where students go through their whole life at school and university faking learning and achieve none of the learning outcomes that we're setting for them. The second issue that I want to raise is that of bias and discrimination. AI tutors will definitely exhibit bias, cultural hegemony, and potential discrimination, sheerly due to the fact that a lot of the data from which large language models have been trained has come from, is kind of tailored towards areas where that data is available, particularly the English-speaking parts of the world, but even within the English-speaking parts of the world within particular cultural groups. And certainly that's an area where Kate Crawford has been commenting for quite a few years that sexism, racism, and other forms of discrimination are kind of built into the algorithms that underline many of the intelligent systems. Reduced human engagement is another issue that we need to be aware of. As we move to more and more AI-based means of teaching people things, we need to be clear on the consequences of reduced human engagement. And certainly a number of researchers have noted the critical impact of instructor communication, support, and presence on students' satisfaction and learning. And therefore, we need to be aware of how this will change with AI teaching devices. And within the augmented reality applications, we need to be really aware of the potential for a kind of detachment from reality or dissociation from the real world. And a number of human-computer interaction researchers have talked about some of these issues in relation to virtual realities. And of course, they may well apply equally to augmented and mixed realities. So the notion of dissociation or a lower sense of objective reality presence, or a sense of depersonalization and derealization. Another two kind of key areas, and this applies not just to educational applications of AI, but to all applications of AI in society. The first is loss of human jobs. And I think many people have noted the potential for AI to do as good a job as humans in various contexts. And I talked about as a learning support assistant, and that's just one example where we could potentially see loss of employment for learning support assistants if AI systems can do as good or a better job, or can do it more efficiently or cheaply. And so this presents all kinds of challenges for society as a whole. And then the second more general impact is in the environmental space. And in a recent article in Nature, Kate Crawford, who's been a strong social commentator on AI for a number of years, noted that the environmental impact of AI means that within years, large AI systems are likely to need as much energy as entire nations. Globally, the demand for water for AI, for cooling the very specialized large processor farms, could be that of the entire United Kingdom. So I want to just finish by just talking a little bit about these issues and whether perhaps we can see them being addressed in order to avoid a potentially dystopian future. So I've just listed the issues here with just some very brief comments on how we could address them. For me, the assessment integrity issue is not easily addressed, but I think that what we need to do to address it is to really think deeply about the purpose of assessment. I think we, particularly in universities, can be a little bit lazy with our assessment and think that the only way to assess any capability is with a written task. And I think, for example, for teachers, they need capabilities to develop written documents as a graduate teacher. But often, as a graduate teacher, they will use AI to help them with that. So for some tasks, we should be quite comfortable with them using AI. But they also need to be able to walk around the classroom and actually put in practice both their content knowledge and their pedagogical knowledge in the classroom, in the moment, without the assistance of AI. And so perhaps we should be assessing them in an authentic way. So rather than asking them to produce a written document that demonstrates that they have the content knowledge or the pedagogical knowledge, perhaps we should be assessing them orally or through examples of authentic practice to actually assess those capabilities. And in doing that in an authentic face-to-face way, there's no opportunity for them to fake it using AI, at least at the moment, prior to those augmented reality technologies, which could, of course, allow them to fake it. The bias and discrimination issues, I think I've heard a lot of work going on in non-English speaking countries to contribute large amounts of information to the databases that are used in generating the large language models. So that's obviously one key part of the solution there. I think we already have the ability to tailor our prompts to kind of ask generative AIs to actually to provide us with information that fits a particular context, and the increasing ability to actually store our prompt preferences will also help us to kind of address some of that. And then obviously, as we start to rely more and more on kind of systems that link together generative AI and other technologies, then we need to refine those systems so that they're also issuing prompts that, that when they're asking for demonstrations of medical practice, that we specifically say I want to see a woman from a non-Anglo background exhibiting this medical practice in order to overcome any kind of bias within the system towards white males exhibiting medical practice, for example. I think the reduced human engagement piece needs more research to really understand the implications, and similarly the consequences of increased use of augmented reality in the context of our everyday lives needs more research in order to better understand the consequences in terms of the way that we engage with reality. I think the lost human jobs one needs ultimately we'll need a complete rethink of the role of work and the economic models that seem to be driving expansion of work hours, even when we become more efficient with our work. And the energy and water use is another interesting one. And so I guess there's a question of whether renewable energy solutions will solve this, or whether the ever-increasing demands for AI and the energy demands of those applications will kind of fight with our ability to move to renewable energy. So look, I want to finish by saying you'll have to be the judge of whether the future of AI in education will be utopian or dystopian. But I want to finish with a kind of optimistic quote. So this is from Professor Danny Liu of the University of Sydney, and he says, as AI does more and more, if we approach it thinking about what is left for us as humans to do, then we diminish ourselves as humans. Instead, if we think about the new possibilities that are open to us at each step of AI's improvement, we expand our horizons and our humanity.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you very much for the Professor Dalgarno gave us a very wonderful presentation from the utopia future of when we have the AI agent to change our daily life from the teacher's work to the workplace learning and the informal learning, just-in-time learning. Yeah, and then transfer to the dystopia future. The dark sides, maybe the dark sides, maybe the challenges we face, such as assessment, the bias, discriminations, and reduced human engagement, and the lost human jobs, and the environmental impacts, and very thoughtful, insightful ideas to propose. And then we will invite our discussant, Dr. Kumar and Alicia, Ms. Alicia, to propose your questions and to have discussed with Professor Dalgarno. Okay, Dr. Kumar and Ms. Alicia.
I think that's Dr. Kumar's pointing to me. That's great. I'll start. So yeah, one of the promises that generative AI that you spoke about is that it can help teachers save time and create assist efficiencies. And of course, there's that parallel concern about academic integrity as students use AI. So I'm curious about how teacher educators are navigating both sides of this coin. They seem to be sort of in the middle there. On one hand, they need to support pre-service teachers in effectively utilizing generative AI as a tool to enhance teaching practice. On the other hand, they have to prepare pre-service teachers to address the potential misuse of students. So maybe some concrete examples from your university or just trends in the field that you're seeing. Thank you.
Yeah, look, I think you've explained that problem really, really clearly. And I've certainly seen it in my own teaching of undergraduates, where I've really wanted to explain to them how they can use generative AI to help them with their searches of the literature and to help them with the understanding of concepts. I was teaching a unit on human development and learning, and yet the university's policies prevent them from using generative AI within their assessment without, unless the task specifically says that they can. And so I've had to kind of, on the one hand, say you can use these things, they're really valuable, but don't use them at all as part of your assessment. And it's definitely a challenge in that we want them to be able to use them as future practitioners, but we want to tell them not to use it in their assessment. And of course, we can provide them with all of the ethical principles around that, but we can never be sure that they will follow those ethical principles. And I think it really is a dilemma in education and probably many other fields.
Okay, so that'll bring me to my next question, which is a broader, I guess, question perhaps. Behind the technologies you introduced will exist teams of researchers, designers, funders, grantors, government agencies with motivations that may not necessarily align with the diverse needs in the classroom. I'm thinking about my own teaching practice as a robotics and engineering teacher. A growing body of literature here in the US is exploring approaches like speculative design, liberatory design, and participatory research to steer these technologies, including AI, AR, towards equity and justice-oriented education and research. I believe in many ways that we can't have a utopia unless we imagine it first, along with those who can benefit the most from it. So how are the concepts of equity and justice grappled with in the Australian education system concerning emerging technologies and research?
Look, it's certainly an issue that a lot of people are highlighting. And, we certainly in Australia are keen to maintain some of our own kind of cultural distinctiveness, and the notion of having, videos generated for students that have American accents or kind of use, specialized words in a way that's different to the way that we use them in Australia is an issue. And I'm sure these issues are even greater for countries that have much more differences from the kind of prevailing American, North American centric kind of databases. I'd be really keen to hear perhaps a little bit more, I guess, Alicia, about the work that you're seeing in the US here, because obviously one of the big problems is the databases themselves. And so even if you're developing a product that actually could be designed in a participatory way that kind of addresses those biases and so on, if it itself is dependent on a large language model that has been developed from a very kind of skewed or biased database, how do you address that within the design?
I think you have to ask yourself whether the large language model that you're using is appropriate. Like, why are we asking that question? Why do we need a model? Why do we need a chatbot? I think that's one question, but also there seems to be another type of literacy that we need to agree upon in the education community as to whether, like, how are we preparing ourselves as teacher educators? How are we preparing our educators for the understanding that it's not perfect? We're dealing with moving targets within the context that they have all this other stuff to do. Because the reality is, many cities across the United States, this is not the fire that they need to put out, right? There's many other issues of equity and justice, but because of the commercial aspect, because of the commercial products that are coming out, there's a sudden attention on it. So I'm not sure I have the answer. I'm hoping that participatory design and some more of this liberatory frameworks will come into play, other than just straight up core AI, which is we see a lot in the United States, where it's mostly focused on the technology and how it applies to education, as opposed to what do you need as a teacher? How are you using it as a teacher? Let me support you as a teacher. There seems to be a bit of a gulf right there in terms of that. But that concludes my question. But I do, for now, if there's time, I certainly have more questions. But I do want to take this opportunity, since I have the mic, to thank the Global Deans Forum and my own dean, Dr. Camilla Bimbo at Peabody College, for this opportunity. It's really an honor to be able to represent Peabody College here with our new faculty, Dr. Kumar, and also Dr. Alyssa Wise. So thank you. And I'll turn the mic over to Dr. Kumar.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry.
Welcome, Dr. Kumar. Yeah.
I wanted to build on the question from Dr. Dalgarno, Alicia, and your answer also. I think I wanted to elevate. I was most excited about the highlight of assessment towards authentic practice. Felt like a strong anchoring vision to me. For Utopia, I think of it as a utopian vision for education that should be the animator of how we think about using AI thoughtfully in these spaces. Because I think it also connects to your response of why are we using and what value does it provide. Like if it is connected to work, connected to developing skills in the world that we have with the tools that we have, I would hope that our assessment and schoolwork increases its focus on the skills that would actually be useful given the tool set all professionals, everyone outside of the school environment is anywhere using. But in that spirit, I'm gonna elevate my second question first, is how are we able to think about, as AI interacts with these existing disciplines and practices, what new disciplines and even ways of learning are we able to envision given the available breadth of AI tools and what might emerge over time as well?
Yeah, it's a really, really important question. Obviously, in my presentation, I focused more on the kind of affordances of AI as a tool to assist in learning, rather than the implications of AI in society for change, for the need for changes to the curriculum. But certainly, if we're preparing students in schools and universities for a future where we would expect that AI would be part of every job, then we really need to think about what are the kind of foundational capabilities that students need. And, you know, I think we still rely on a lot of rote learning in schools. And it really, you know, and certainly, you know, knowledge-rich curriculums are important because we can't do anything if we don't actually hold some of the knowledge ourselves. But I think the ability to very conveniently get knowledge presented to us in context, available for immediate use, that we'll get with generative AI, that kind of takes the ubiquitous availability of the internet to a whole new level, really changes the thinking around what's the kind of knowledge that we actually need to hold in our brain versus the knowledge and the skills that we need to grab the knowledge as we need it and apply it in particular context. And it's and particularly, I think also as we start to see AIs kind of almost taking on some jobs in employment alongside humans. And, you know, hopefully in a utopian future, the human will still kind of be in control and will be providing quality assurance for the AI. But then what are the capabilities a human needs to be able to, you know, let's say you're a physician or a doctor and you're trying to choose a drug to prescribe to a patient. And of course, you're going to ask the AI to suggest the drug. The AI has been listening into the consultation. It has all of the symptoms in front of it. It's going to suggest a particular drug. What are the skills that you need to make a judgment about whether to actually prescribe that drug or whether there's something else to consider, some additional question to ask before you actually make that decision? And really understanding that is important. And then obviously, you know, taking that to the next level is actually having people have the capability to choose between a range of different AI tools, perhaps even integrate those tools together to create kind of tailored applications.
Thank you for that. And as you're describing that, I'm frequently imagining that I think we do need to do something about. Imagine in some ways who is actually going to be making these tools, who develops the tools around, develops the skills around being able to make them in ways that we, many of the users, all of us can be sophisticated, informed users of this space. And connecting that to the other question that I've been wondering about, how do we think about the balance of prioritizing reorienting education towards making students responsible consumers versus also putting in more energy and making them creators or like deeper understanders of these AI tools?
And it is an issue that we've been grappling with for a while, particularly in the educational technology field. I think there's been a bit of a sort of a new wave of interest in the last 10 years or so in teaching coding, for example, in primary schools, partly as a really valuable technique for teaching kind of algorithmic thinking, but also because those skills in being able to code can translate into people actually creating much more sophisticated tools as part of their work in the workplace. Now, obviously, generative AI tools can do coding for us, but can also enable us to kind of potentially create things in a kind of a more verbal, interactive kind of way. And we're not seeing it yet, but I think a really interesting next application will be the ability to actually, in a sort of a verbal, interactive way, work with an AI to kind of create an AI tool or create a tool that brings together different pieces. Because, you know, at the moment, if you want to combine, say, ChatGPT with a audio transcriber, with a language translator, with an image generator, and so on, you kind of ultimately need to be able to write code to kind of bring the pieces together and feed the output of one into the input of another. It shouldn't be long before we can actually create those linkage pieces and therefore create our own kind of applications of AI just in a verbal, interactive way, talking to the AI. And maybe it already exists, and please tell me if I haven't found it yet.
I don't think it exists that easily. I know that ChatGPT and other companies are opening up APIs, but in all of these things, I do frequently also wonder, almost worry about, as we were just discussing, like who actually has control over the models, where do these come from? A lot of these foundational things are often fixed and determined by people, by entities outside of our power, and who's also using this data, the issues of privacy that you brought up. So I'm also often wondering, in what ways can we elevate and keep a focus on the awareness around what are the capabilities and limitations of these tools, as well as shift power around making and the tools that are used in many of these contexts.
Yeah, and look, I think there certainly are a number of people calling for a complete pause on research and development in AI because they see the risks as too great. And I think, Alicia, you kind of alluded to this point before when you mentioned that perhaps there are other areas which are more important than AI in terms of, you know, addressing disadvantaged communities and so on. But I guess the flip side of that is that if you look at, say, the scenario of having an AI tutor for every child in a classroom, you think about sort of disadvantaged communities, and I know in the US there's a very big difference between the best resourced and the least resourced schools, as there is in any country, but I think in the US it's a really significant issue. So the notion of addressing some of that disadvantage in some communities by using technologies that perhaps can cheaply address a shortage of teachers and a shortage of teacher assistants, and perhaps allow those students to kind of catch up with their peers in much more wealthy communities. You know, to me, there's a kind of compelling argument for that, even if there's a sort of a potential bias in the technologies. And so I think we're really going to be grappling with the, do we pause and not resource this, and therefore perhaps miss out on some really positive benefits, or do we accept the positive benefits but also have to put up with some of those kind of risks? Maybe Alicia, you might comment on that, because I think you've thought about some of these issues.
I'm with you as long as that intelligent tutor or agent is also including some of those embodied ways of communicating that our teachers are so good at, right? Using gestures or reading body language on the level, so that we don't create a situation where students are sitting at home doing homework on a computer just to go right back in the morning to school sitting on a computer for, you know, an extended amount of time. I know that that's not exactly the kind of like, that's an extreme view of that. But yeah, that would be my concern, is sort of that dehumanization that you also spoke about as well, at the expense of, hey, every kid has a tutor, a support, also. And then if we're also saying that models are still inherently biased, giving that to every child, there's a lot of hoops and hurdles and guidelines and perhaps legislation that needs to happen on a global scale. I think not just here in the US, like we could come together as like the United Nations has on the Data Manifesto for Children, to kind of set some guidelines or some, you know, some guardrails about how school might look in that situation.
Mm-hmm. Lisa, I know you haven't had a chance to kind of make any comments of your own, and I'm sure you've got things to say about how these technologies are being used in your Chinese context.
Yes, I think I appreciate all of your great ideas and very insightful, inspired me a lot. Actually, yes, as a researcher, I try to do some research about how to use the technology into the teaching and learning. And just now, the professor, you gave us 3 scenarios. Yes, and especially for the teacher work scenario, I think about this scenario a lot. And also as a teacher, I conduct the research. I conduct the course. In the email, I say I conduct the writing course. Yes, I also think about how to use or combine the AI agent, like some kind of AI, generative AI, into my classroom teaching to help the student to learn to write. It's very challenging. All of the things I have, yeah, all of the challenges, yeah, just now you said, like the assessment, the writing integrity, yes, the students will communicate with the tools, and then how, as a teacher, how to do this, how to coordinate this, how to improve their person-to-person interactive. It's very challengeable things. And yes, for me, it's just in the beginning, I just try to do a little bit and think about how to combine these tools into my classroom. And yes, I think for the native, for the so-called the digital natives, right? This generation, they like to use the tools, but as a teacher, how to improve their person-to-person interaction, and such as Dr. just now Dr. Kumar and Professor Dalgarno, you said to improve the students' deep learning through the person-to-person interaction. Yes, also very challengeable, and also another thing is for the writing integrity. Because I just now I said I conduct the writing course. The integrity thing is also very challenging. So actually, I would like to, based on your observation in Australia and the US, maybe you will give me some great suggestions or comment to help me improve. Yeah, maybe.
I think it's very much a work in progress, and I don't think any of us have the answers. I think we're all experimenting and exploring while watching the risks as we go. I personally would be disappointed if we paused the research, but I do think we need to be very careful about the potential negative consequences if we apply these things without carefully monitoring the impact.
Thank you. And Alicia and Dr. Kumar, if you have any comments or suggestions?
I think that's a great note to end on. I also agree of being as conscious as possible around what goals we are proceeding towards, what is being most promoted in our educational environments, and frequently, again, also echoing what Alicia said about having utopian visions in mind as animating, thinking deeply about what our values and dreams of justice are and how AI can best empower them. Because for sure, it can do a lot of good. It can also do harm, and we need to strike that balance.
Yeah. Yes, very thank you. Well, okay. And for the time limited, I have summarized our online dialogue this time. To summarize our dialogue, I have to say that I personally very like this topic. The future education of the age of AI and Utopia and Dystopia. And thanks for the Professor Dalgarno give us this topic and stimulate our discussion, and it's inspired us a lot. And I think not only inspire us to think about the AI, but to think about how the AI work critically. And I think all of us agree that people should not only focus on leveraging and optimizing the tools, right? The tools, the AI, but also asking questions about how we want to live with new technologies in the future. Okay, and thank you very much for your engagement, for this wonderful dialogue and discussion. And thank you. And I think we have to stop here and have a nice day. Well, thank you.